Just when I thought I wouldn't have a lot to talk about on the podcast, just when I thought that, this podcast would be not lame. I will never say lame. The show will never be lame. I'll always keep it real, keep it entertaining, keep it fun. But just when I thought the podcast wouldn't have much to talk about, we're kind of in that lull of the draft, post-free agency, not much UFC action to talk about, not much NFL action to talk about. I forgot that the NFL owners' meetings were this week. 32 GMs, 32 NFL owners, 32 head coaches decided to meet up at one central location in Phoenix, Arizona, take some phony photos, brown nose a little bit, pat each other on the back, and basically kiss Bill Belichick's butt while they're drinking some wine and smoking some cigars. It's basically what it is. And let's just get that out there. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's just keep it real. It's the NFL owners meetings. But at some point, all 32 NFL owners and all 32 GMs and all 32 coaches had to get down to brass tacks and really dive into what should change about this NFL replay rule. Now, first off, I'm going to dive into the fact that you guys know what you're listening to. You guys know what you're going to get. My name is Ryan Thomas. You're listening to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast live on YouTube, live on Twitter, live on Facebook, and live streaming on Spreaker.com. You can follow the podcast on any of those vices or even Instagram. I'm posting stories to my Instagram, as they call it these days. The kids call it these days. Basically, little blurbs of what I think about sports topics the moment they happen. So, for instance, Thomas Takes. You can get those on Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take, on Facebook, as well as on my Twitter page at Ryan Thomas Take. Twitter is blown up. Instagram's blown up. Facebook's been blown up for years. So let's just get right down to it. That's who I am. That's the show that you're tuning into. If you're new to the show, welcome aboard. If you're not new to the show, thanks for listening. If you are new to the show as well, thanks for listening. But back to the subject matter. We knew that these GMs, coaches, and owners would have to meet up. We knew that they would have to decide what direction they were going to go in as far as this NFL replay rule. Now, I have stated that everything should be reviewable. Everything as far as a bad call, a questionable call. I feel like the challenge flag itself, that red challenge flag, some coaches decide to tuck it into their sock. Some coaches decide to tuck it into their back pocket. Some guys put it in their hoodie or whatever, like Bill Belichick does, or whatever. But the challenge flag, the art of throwing that red flag out onto the field, should have more of a wingspan than what it does, rather than just challenging a fumble or challenging the spot of the ball or whatever. A coach can decide to challenge that whatever facet of the game. I think it should be wider than that. I think it should be penalties. I think penalties should be reviewable, replayable. And the argument against that is, the Joe idiot, calling into the radio station, he says, well, I don't want the games to last longer. I don't want these games to last longer. I want to see these games, go 3 hours and that's it. Anything longer than that is too long. It's too long. Well, that's too damn bad. I don't want to watch a football game for 3 hours. My answer back to that is, I don't want to watch a football game for 3 hours and then leave that game not knowing who the real winner was, or not knowing, even worse, who the real loser was. I want a definitive result. I want to know who wins, and I want to know who loses. I don't want any questionable call to dictate who wins and who loses a game. There's 16 regular season games. Then there's the playoffs. If this is the most prestigious trophy, the Super Bowl trophy, the Vince Lombardi trophy, the biggest championship game of any sport in a calendar year, the Super Bowl, I don't want to have to wonder, well, if this one call happened, would New England have played the New Orleans Saints in the Super Bowl, or would they have played the LA Rams anyway? And I don't want to have to think that. And we were all forced to think that, whether you're a Patriots fan or not. We were all forced to think, well, the Patriots played the Saints, or the Patriots are playing the Rams, but they should have played the Saints. No. That was an egregious call. I've dived into that. But that call was the genesis, among many, of bad penalties that should be reviewed, that should be questioned, that should be deemed to be just pathetically ignorant by the part of the refs that are commentating these games. And thankfully, they were. Now, the details are a little bit iffy right now. I could only go to the original article that featured the majority of the rule change. But what we do know is that it's on a one-year trial basis. Pass interference can be challenged by coaches and reviewed by officials next season. That is a massive step forward in the right direction. An article written by Kevin Seifert of NFL Nation. NFL owners have approved a massive philosophical expansion of its replay review system, bowing to pressure from coaches and fans who are outraged by a missed pass interference call in the NFC Championship game. For only 1 year, pass interference, both offensive and defensive, will be reviewable, the first penalties and judgment calls ever to be added to the list of approved reviews. Moreover, coaches will be able to challenge non-calls for pass interference. The replay booth, in conjunction with the league's officiating office in New York, will initiate those challenges in the final 2 minutes of each half. Meanwhile, owners made 2 expected votes earlier Tuesday. They made permanent the 2018 changes to the kickoff rule, which had been on a 1-year trial basis. They also voted to eliminate all blindside blocks, not to just those to the head or neck area, to increase safety on punts and other plays. Owners also approved a proposal that gives teams a choice in the timing of enforcement of a personal foul or unsportsmanlike conduct after a scoring play. The yardage can now be marked off either on the extra point or on the kickoff. In other voting on rules, the NFL tabled a proposal originally put forth by the Kansas City Chiefs to guarantee each team a possession in overtime. The league also defeated a proposal from the Denver Broncos to give teams a one-time option in the fourth quarter to have a 4th and 15 from their 35-yard line as an alternative to an onside kick. Very interesting. Lots of rule changes and rule proposals that have been made by these 32 NFL owners that have been trying to change the game for the better in their own opinion. Now, I'm a little bit iffy on the whole Denver Broncos proposal of proposing this 4th and 15 from their 35-yard line as an alternative to the onside kick. I'm iffy on that. You know, we're trying to make the game safer, but at the same time, for every which way we try to make the game safer, we're only somewhat devaluing the game in another way. So I'm not really too gung-ho on that. I'm thinking that it's one of those situations where we could definitely start to see more changes. I mean, these last few years, these owners have come together and they have a say as far as what they believe, how they believe this game could be better. And the best part is they vote on it. The fraternity of NFL owners vote on it. And I think that's fair. I think this is fair. I think this should have happened a long time ago. I think this is going to greatly improve the game of football. The fact that these penalties will be made reviewable within the final 2 minutes of each half, I believe, as to what the article said. If I'm misreading that, I apologize, but that's what I got from it. So that's how I see fit. And we'll see what happens there, but I think that this will be something that will be looked at as a possibility and beyond, more further than what it is. The ultimate goal for me is to see football in which virtually every flag can be made reviewable, because these referees cannot be trusted. These referees are garbage. Terrible. They've ruined the game. They make the games longer for the dumbest of reasons. Let the players play. I'm of that opinion. I've been of that opinion ever since I was a little kid. I want to see the players play. I don't want to see these players fall into this trap of being overly cautious while out on the football field. I feel like the more overly cautious you are while playing a high-contact game, the more likely you are to see injuries, to see things that are just horrific on the field. NFL kickoffs, yes, really dangerous play, but yes, it's part of football. That's like saying, I'm trying to think of a dangerous play in baseball, but they did take away the most dangerous play in baseball, after all, the collision at home plate. But that was also one of the most exciting plays in baseball. It's very tough when you're trying to balance safety over excitement. And to an extent, I do get that, but I think the NFL has actually done a pretty decent job in balancing out safety over excitement, because the kickoff does exist, but the rule change helped nullify the kickoff return. And that is a dynamic that I think should not be understated. But nonetheless, as far as the first 15 minutes of the show and the 3-part 45-minute episode today, I do like the fact that they made this rule change. I like the fact that a lot of owners were very vocal about it. I like the fact that Sean Payton really championed it, and the New Orleans Saints owner championed it as well, and rightfully so. They were, for all intents and purposes, effed over in that game. And that's the most blunt way I could put it. But at the same time, to say they were screwed over, they were effed over. I mean, they should have been playing in that Super Bowl against the Patriots, and I think they would have put up a much better fight than that of the Los Angeles Rams. They were actually ready to play that game, where the Rams were just happy to be there. And that was the biggest takeaway I feel for the LA Rams. Yeah, the Rams defense played pretty well. They did their thing. But the offense looked like a deer in headlights, and the offense is largely what got them there throughout the season, what got them those wins throughout the season. With the New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees, I don't think there's any moment in Drew Brees' career where he's looked like a deer in the headlights. I haven't seen it. So, that being said, let's move on. I want to talk about the next topic of discussion, and that is in the mixed martial arts world. For all the MMA fans that will be tuning into this podcast pre-recorded, you can fast forward to the 14-minute mark for my take on Conor McGregor. So the first 14 minutes I discussed the NFL changes. Next 14 minutes I'm going to discuss the Conor McGregor situation. So this morning I wake up around 7:30 a.m. I'm in the process of waking up, brushing my teeth, taking my shower, going outside to embark on my journey throughout the rest of the day, my work day, my day job. And my day job does not involve me going into a radio station and recording and doing what I'm doing now, unfortunately. Not yet. I'm getting there. We will see it, trust me. But my day job involves driving to a specific place, working hour A to hour B, and then going home. And in the process of literally getting out of my bed, before I took my shower, before I brushed my teeth, before I get dressed. I'm still in my pajamas. I roll out of bed. First thing I do every single morning, I grab my phone. I have to stay as up to date as anybody in order to maintain my level of credibility and maintain my level of being an informing source of sports information. I'd like to say that I'm both of those things. I'd like to say I'm credible, and I can maintain myself as one of the more reliable sources of information, especially locally. But I think my wings have been spread out a little bit thanks to the lovely thing known as Twitter. But that's neither here nor there. I roll out of bed. I go to grab my phone. And the first thing I see, I go to Instagram, because that's the app that I like to use the most to post a story or to write a story, which then gets shared to my Facebook. First thing I see is a photo from MMAfighting.com, MMAfighting.com's Instagram, that featured Conor McGregor's tweet. And let's go to Twitter. Let's take a look at Twitter. Let's actually see what it is that Conor McGregor said in his tweet, because I want to dive into it. And to say it's a trending topic, 280 tweets today feature the hashtag Conor McGregor. 1,110 tweets in the last hour featured the misspelling of Conor McGregor, and 1,470 with the correct spelling of Conor McGregor were tweeted in the last hour. But 5 hours from now, 24 hours would be 24 hours later, and in the wee hours of the early morning, 1 o'clock, Conor McGregor said, "Hey guys, quick announcement. I've decided to retire from the sport formerly known as mixed martial art today." Quote, mixed martial art today. "I wish all my old colleagues well going forward in competition. I now join my former partners on this venture. Already in retirement. Proper pina coladas on me, fellas." 322,000 people liked the tweet. 79,900 people retweeted it, and 17,000 people commented on it. Now, interestingly enough, a pre-recorded interview featuring the king of late night, Jimmy Fallon, and Conor McGregor was filmed 2 weeks ago. They put it out last night on late night. As this is on, a half hour to 20 minutes afterwards, Conor posts this tweet. And as the interview concludes, Jimmy Fallon concludes it by asking, "What's next? What is the next step for you? Who are you going to fight? We want to see you fight." Who doesn't want to see Conor McGregor fight? Right? So Conor says, "Yeah, we got something going on for July. We're in a little bit of a negotiation. We don't know where we're at, but we're getting there. We don't know who the opponent's going to be, but we're setting up a negotiation." Now, for anyone that's not dialed in, they think, okay, he's a big draw. He knows that there's a negotiation process, and he should negotiate. He's worth a lot of money. He's made the company a lot of money. That makes sense. But to a hardcore fan like myself, someone that knows the ins and outs of following the business, especially since its inception, tongue twister there, since its inception of becoming what it is today and following Conor McGregor's journey from essentially the beginning, the deal is already set. The contract is already written. The terms have already been set. Prior to fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov, Conor McGregor signed a 6-fight deal with the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Now, obviously, what is being negotiated from one fight to the next is pay-per-view points. How much more pay-per-view points is Conor going to get than the other, than the next fight? One pay-per-view, he might get, X amount of percentage. Maybe we'll just say 10. He's going to get 10% of the pay-per-views. And then the next event, he might say, "Hey, I want double that. I want 20. Next event, he might say, "I want 30. That's typically what is being negotiated in a case like this, where you have the main draw, the main athlete, the main guy that everyone wants to see fight. He could fight a broomstick, a telephone pole, a lamp, a garbage can, anyone who's anyone would want to see Conor McGregor fight anything. So there's that. So he has the leverage in a negotiation for sure in that regard. But the UFC is big. It's powerful. The last podcast I did refer to the fact that Dana White, the guy that runs the UFC, the president of the UFC, doesn't own it, but runs it day to day and has for almost 20 years now, said that he is not going to give Conor what he wants. And what Conor has wanted has been the same thing the last 3 years, and the tune has not changed. Moments after beating Eddie Alvarez and becoming that champ, the first simultaneous champ in UFC history, where he was the champion at 145 and he was the champion at 155. Mind you, he never defended his featherweight title, but that's just something I'm going to throw in there. Champ anyway, champ regardless. He says after he destroys Eddie Alvarez, which was no small feat in any regard, but I'll get to that a little bit later. He says, I want some equity. I want a portion of the company. If we have to negotiate pay-per-view, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I took that as when Conor said that he wanted more equity in the company, wanted some ownership, wanted some shares of the UFC, I took that as I'm sick and tired of negotiating pay-per-view points when we know what the pay-per-view is going to sell no matter what. I've made my money. I've made my pay-per-view money. And this was before the Floyd Mayweather fight. This was in November of 2016. He fought Floyd in August of 2017. So this was before he got the biggest payday of his career. He was already set pretty well financially, especially for an MMA fighter, especially for a UFC fighter. The top 1%. We always talk about in politics, the 1%, the rich of the rich, the top of the heap. Conor McGregor is the 0.1% of MMA fighters. The amount of money that he's made is incomparable, is not even comparable to 99.9% of the athletes that are in the UFC. They do not get paid well. Only the select draws get paid very well, and he's made more money than all of those other draws probably put together. I think that's a safe assessment. Ronda Rousey, George St. Pierre, John Jones, Brock Lesnar. I think Conor McGregor has made more money than all of them put together. Judging by the Floyd fight, especially. But I think even up to the Floyd fight, you'd say maybe he was 2 or 3 on that list in comparison to GSP and Brock, and maybe Ronda, tied with Ronda at the time in terms of money that he had made per fight and in total in his UFC career. He'd made around 15, 20 million. Nobody touched that outside of GSP and Brock, who were the 2 bigger pay-per-view draws, and Ronda. I always forget to throw her in there, and I don't know why, but I do. But Conor wanted part of the ownership. He wanted some shares. He said, yeah, I want some shares. That was 3 years ago. 3 years later, the guy fights the biggest fight ever, the highest purchased pay-per-view ever in Floyd Mayweather versus himself, sold more pay-per-views around the world than any other pay-per-view fight ever, did not sell as many in North America between Canada and the United States. Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao still hold that record, but in terms of worldwide buys, pay-per-view buys, Mayweather and McGregor was number 1. Still is number 1. So he fights the biggest fight ever, literally, and fights Khabib Nurmagomedov, which then became the biggest UFC fight ever. Biggest purchased UFC fight. So he holds records upon records. 5 of the top 6 UFC pay-per-views ever. The biggest pay-per-view ever. So the guy is the pay-per-view king. That's one thing we can't question. He is the best pay-per-view draw outside of Floyd Mayweather in the last 15 to 20 years. Those are the two top dogs. You put them together and boom, you got yourself the biggest fight ever. And that's why it happened. But now it's 3 years later, and the circumstances have greatly changed. Outside of the fact that Conor McGregor is still the biggest pay-per-view draw, he doesn't have two shiny belts wrapped around his shoulder anymore. One was stripped from him. Another was stripped from him. One of those belts he tried to get back, and he lost. And he didn't just lose. He got dominated. And everybody knows, my fandom, I'm a fan of Conor. I like Conor. I've really enjoyed watching his rise up the division, his meteoric rise through the UFC and becoming one of the biggest pop culture icons that sports has ever seen, and for sure the biggest icon that mixed martial arts has ever seen. And I will say that forever, to the day I die, that guy is the biggest name ever in the sport. Maybe not the best fighter of all time, but the biggest draw, the biggest name, the biggest hype man that the sport has ever seen. I can't deny that. But circumstances have changed. Asking for ownership now, if he didn't get it in 2016, at the height of his career, at the precipice of superstardom, prior to fighting Floyd, he's not going to get it now. He's not going to get it now. And maybe the UFC is in the wrong for that. Maybe the UFC should give him some percentage of the ownership shares. Because this company is now owned by WME-IMG. They're a major Hollywood agency that have major Hollywood clients like Sylvester Stallone, like Mark Wahlberg, like Conan O'Brien. And all three of those actors, media personalities, late night TV hosts, restaurant entrepreneurs, the damn Italian Stallion owns shares in the UFC. Mark Wahlberg owns shares in the UFC. Conan O'Brien owns shares in the UFC. The only guy that I think could kick some ass out of those three names, legitimately, probably Mark Wahlberg. He had a little bit of a, streaky. I'll say Sylvester Stallone as well. For Pete's sake, the dude's 77 years old, I think, and he's jacked still. But to think that those guys have ownership in a company that they never fought in, they never made that company money, they're not Conor McGregor. So I get that. From that angle of it, I get it. And I'm playing devil's advocate on both sides here for this very reason. Because I have two great points. The first one is that one. I get why Conor would want ownership shares, given that Sylvester Stallone, that Mark Wahlberg, that, Conan O'Brien have those shares. Those guys never fought in the octagon. They never will. And Conor McGregor's the biggest icon that's ever stepped foot in the octagon. So that I get. But the UFC knew that Conor McGregor wanted these things, and they didn't give it to him. But what they did give him was an opportunity to go into another realm, represent mixed martial arts in a boxing versus MMA type fight, where it was the biggest boxer, the biggest name boxer versus the biggest name MMA fighter, and they would box in a boxing ring for 11 rounds. 10 rounds, 11 rounds. And that was his greatest achievement in my eyes. The fact that he not only made that fight a reality, the fact that the fight became a reality, and then he actually fought to the level that he did. The most diehard Floyd fan can tell me, yes, Floyd did carry him. Floyd made him tired. Floyd did a lot of that, and I would not disagree with that. But you watch that fight again. You watch that fight from start to finish. Nobody thought Conor could do the things that he did in the early to middle rounds of that fight. Whether Floyd was carrying him or not, I don't think there's any fighter in their right mind that would walk into a boxing ring and say, I'm going to carry this guy and tire him out and make him look stupid. outside of Muhammad Ali. And with all due respect, look what happened to a man that was willing to do that. And I'll just leave that there. I don't say that proudly. I just say that smartly, because that was not a smart strategy. Did he win that fight? Yeah, he did win that fight against George Foreman. He did rope-a-dope, but it wasn't smart. It wasn't the smartest strategy. Would you go into a boxing ring? You're gonna box someone. You're gonna go toe to toe. You're gonna go into a ring where it's you, him, and the ref. That's it. The corner can only instruct you so much before you're really on autopilot in there, and you can't hear a thing outside of the gloves touching your skin, outside of the crowd noise, outside of the fact that you're in tunnel vision. You're trying to focus on you beating another man. You go in there with that strategy, that is not smart. Did it work for Ali? Yes, it did. But I'm not going to anoint Floyd Mayweather as a genius for that. I wouldn't anoint Floyd Mayweather as... I look at it as almost like, why would Floyd Mayweather, this great boxer, this guy that's 49-0 at the time, why would he feel like he has to rope-a-dope a boxer making his pro boxing debut, who's an MMA fighter, into this rope-a-dope match in order to win? Because Floyd was 40 damn years old, and Floyd was slow. Floyd's wheels are gone. They're gone. That 2-year retirement took the speed off those legs. He couldn't do the shoulder roll anymore. He couldn't do the bob and weave. That style would not have worked against Conor because he didn't have the speed to do it. So the only thing he could do was just wait it out, hope that he didn't get knocked out, which he almost did, and hopefully just get through these middle rounds and win the fight. And fortunately for him, it was the only way for him to win. Like in Avengers of Infinity War, when Tony Stark says to Doctor Strange, how many outcomes is there did you go through? And he says 400,000. And Doctor Strange, Iron Man says, what's the only way? How many do we win? And he said, and Doctor Strange said 1. That was Floyd Mayweather's only shot at winning that fight, making Conor McGregor continue to exhaust himself, and it worked. I'm not saying that Floyd should be criticized for that. It was brilliant, but it showed the reality that Floyd Mayweather's only shot at beating a younger, stronger, bigger fighter was to wear him out. And that says a lot to me about that fight. So that aside, fights the biggest fight ever, goes largely the distance, gets tired, and he gets quote-unquote TKO'd. He was out on his feet. It was fine stoppage, whatever. It's whatever. But Conor did pretty damn well. Then you have this lull in his career where he takes a lot of time off after that. Took a lot of time off before that, takes a lot of time off after that, recharges his batteries, raises his baby. And in the process, we know what fight's coming up next. We know that he's going to get a shot at his title, but we didn't know who it was going to be against. And when he wasn't willing to sign on the dotted line, he wanted to let the division play itself out. Khabib Nurmagomedov emerged as the new UFC lightweight champion. And I'm sorry, guys. I know I'll have some Conor fans listening. I'm really sorry to tell you this, but that was not a fight. For as big a fight that was, for as much hype as there was in that fight, that was not a fight. That was a mauling. It was a drubbing. And really, essentially, the only round that Conor won was the round that Khabib took off. The third round. After dropping him, after almost finishing him, after almost getting the TKO, Khabib was just left standing there, just waiting the round out, sinking in a takedown maybe late in the third round. And outside of that, that was a breeze, cool, calm, collected round where even Conor, knowing that Khabib was taking a break, couldn't finish him. Knowing he was taking a break, couldn't avoid getting taken down. That was not the same fighter that we saw versus Eddie Alvarez. Not even physically, not mentally, not in any facet. And granted, two completely different opponents. Eddie Alvarez is willing to stand there and trade. Khabib is a true tactician, a true technician, all that. And he's an elite fighter. But that was a drubbing. So now you have a fighter that's saying that he wants these things that he wanted 3 years ago, but the circumstances are even more against him now. Outside of the fact that he's the biggest draw, which I already said he is the biggest draw without a doubt. Outside of that fact, you don't have a fighter anymore that has 2 titles. You don't have a fighter anymore that has this mystique that he previously had. You do not have the champ. You have a fighter that is coming off of a loss. You have a fighter that hasn't won a fight in 3 years. I said earlier, his performance versus Eddie Alvarez, that win, UFC 205, we're in the UFC 236, 237, 236. That was a long time ago. That was 3 years ago. November 2016 almost. Almost 3 years. This is not the same set of circumstances. 2, they don't know who to put him up against. Donald Cerrone made all the sense in the world. That fight fell through because Donald Cerrone's not waiting for anyone. Donald Cerrone laid out the terms that he wanted. The UFC was very stuck up and trying to, very stern, I should say, and trying to give it to him. He wanted that fight, but he wanted it at a price. And rightfully so. These guys deserve to get paid. My biggest takeaway from this is if you're Conor McGregor, how can you ask for things knowing that the circumstances have changed in your fighting career? And to Dana White, it's almost as if I can say, too, I see both sides of this. I can't really go one way or the other, and that's why we are where we are, where Conor just washes his hands of the entire thing and says, I'm done, I'm stepping away, figure it out. If you want me, come get me. This is 100% a negotiation tactic. This is 100% a ploy. And you know what? I hope it's not. I hope that it's true. I hope that he does want to retire. Because usually a fighter that even has the smallest inkling that he wants to retire does want to retire in the back of his mind. He's made his money. He knows his worth. He's going to continue to make more money with his business ventures. Why continue something if you've already made it? That's the question. Oh, man, it aggravates me. It really does. This career, this guy that I really admired and enjoyed watching him fight, I feel like the Floyd fight might have been the worst thing that ever happened to his MMA career. But at the same time, it's the only facet of his career that I can look at and say, yeah, that I can respect. More than the Aldo fight. More than the Alvarez fight. The fact that he went in that boxing ring as a 0-0 pro boxer and did his thing for 11 rounds versus one of the best of all time. Much respect if this is the end. All credit to him. He made his money. He made his worth. And I can respect that if this is the end. But I don't think it is. I think Conor will be back late 2019. And he has not taken himself out of the USADA testing pool. So choke on that, MMA fans. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take. Take care.